welcome to the Seamless Connection podcast. I know what you're thinking. I'm not Meena. I'm guest hosting today, and Meena is joining us on the podcast, which is really exciting, as well as we have a big crew here with us today. I'm going to start off by giving everyone, we'll start with Meena, giving them a chance to give their 30-second intro, and we'll dive into this great episode here today. Meena, take it away.
Fantastic. Thanks, Jared. We'll have to have a poll after to see who hosted it better. I'm thrilled to have all my partners here today with the podcast. Looking forward to diving into all the different thoughts across healthcare across the board. And I don't want to take up too much time because you've all heard from me plenty of times in the past. So off to Colin.
Hey, hello everyone. Colin Banas, Chief Medical Officer for DrFirst. An internal medicine physician by training, joined the company about 5 years ago. But prior to that, I was the CMIO and a hospitalist for Virginia Commonwealth University Health System. I was there for 17 years before joining DrFirst.
Hi, everyone. I'm Stacey Johnston. I am Vice President and Chief Applications Officer here at Baptist Health in Jacksonville, Florida. And I am also a hospitalist. I still practice medicine on some nights and weekends. I was the former Chief Medical Information Officer here at Baptist and have moved over for full responsibility of all of the clinical and revenue cycle applications, including Epic and so many others.
And hey, everybody, I'm Jake Lancaster. I'm an internal medicine physician and the Chief Medical Information Officer for a different Baptist Memorial Healthcare based out of Memphis, Tennessee, no affiliation with the one in Florida. And I'm also the CMO for our Baptist Medical Group, where I run our virtual clinic. And I do see patients in that clinic as well as in the hospital as a hospitalist on occasion.
Thanks, everyone, for those quick intros. And I'm really excited for this conversation today because we have kind of people in different roles. So we're going to really tee up some questions individually, and then we'll also have some opportunities for people to add on to someone else's response. So we'll start with Dr. Banas. How has the role of a chief medical officer evolved in recent years through your lens? And I would really love if you could particularly highlight, what role AI and challenges have ended up creating in terms of a global health crisis. Sorry, that was like two big questions, but I'm like, you can handle it.
Yeah, and I think you'll get a different answer from a CMO of a healthcare IT company than you will from someone like Jake, who is heading up a health system or an ambulatory clinic. But one of the biggest things that comes to mind within the last 5 years is leadership in a work from home environment, in a remote environment. It's a lot different than it was when I first started with the company in terms of interactions with folks, meetings, the organic conversations and things that occur just from simply being together. And so, taking on a CMO role post-pandemic when things have gone largely remote, and I'm probably not alone. I think a lot of what my health system colleagues are experiencing is probably very similar, probably more hybrid than what I have. So I think that's a very big one, pretty big distinction from 2020 to prior to 2020. You mentioned AI. The other challenge with CMO in the healthcare IT is keeping up. It is really, really difficult to keep up. I mean, it was difficult before, even from a clinical perspective. It was almost nearly impossible, which is why technology is so important at the point of patient care. But keeping up with the explosion of artificial intelligence within the last year has become very difficult. Every day it seems like there's another paper either saying this is the greatest thing since Swiss cheese, or AI is evil. Look at its, the payers are using it to deny appropriate care to Medicare Advantage patients, which was a pretty big story a couple of weeks ago. So keeping up is hard. I actually do spend a fair amount of time reading. I think I always did, but reading specifically about AI, whether it's peer-reviewed literature, testimonials, even podcasts, there's just so much out there to absorb.
Thanks so much. Yeah, it's I feel like it's not a podcast nowadays if AI is not mentioned. At least it has to hit that 5 to 10 quota, or what are we doing?
Yeah,
here,
but
right?
it's lost its luster. Like people are dull to it now. How do you separate the real from the the overblown promises? How do you know if it really is AI or if people are just attaching that tag?
Yeah, that is a really good point. I get vendors that, I mean, every single vendor in healthcare right now has an AI component. I mean, I don't think they would approach anybody and say that they didn't have anything related to artificial intelligence, even if when you look under the hood, it's just some simple regression or something like that.
Yeah, for us, I think it's a lot of it is governance and not implementing AI just for AI's sake. And so this is where your informatics is really going to play a key role. What are some of the key workflows, key initiatives that where AI can really play a role? So we set up an AI Institute, which is basically our governing body of any AI. We've actually done some work with DrFirst and partnering with them and helping utilizing AI to help the medication reconciliation and the med history be more accurate, have more data coming in. They're able to infer medications from prescriptions when there's incomplete information in the database. So there are definitely key use cases for AI. Another one that we are really looking forward to is we are one of the early adopters of Epic's AI in-basket solution. And it's a lot of prompt engineering, but I tell the docs that we're working with, it's not going to solve all of the world's in-basket problems. It's really specific use cases. It can't make clinical decisions, and so it's about basically queuing up a message that would be appropriate to send to the patient, but it still needs to be reviewed by the provider. So there's a lot of great work there. Another great one that we're working on is AI and targeting specific atrial fibrillation and where the appropriate ablation should be. So there are some amazing use cases out there, but you have to be deliberate. You have to have a significant amount of governance around AI. And what is your comfort level within your organization for moving forward with some of these solutions?
And one of the things that we've seen, at least from a vendor perspective, and Jake, I'd love to see Stacey and Colin, if you guys are seeing the same thing. One of the things we hear from hospitals all the time is data and analytics. So Stacey, you gave some great use cases in terms of how it can be used from a provider perspective, clinically, et cetera. But one of the key pain points we're hearing from hospitals as well is they don't have as much visibility as they would want or like in terms of what's happening with the data that they already have, right? It's a lot of numbers, it's a lot of data, but what does it mean at the end of the day? What are the actual insights? Are you seeing a lot of AI? So I know our platform does that for our clients, but that's not something I see more broadly, and that's still a complaint I hear pretty much from across the board, I think. So I'd love to see what you guys are also seeing there.
Yeah, some of the things I've seen recently related to using AI to help understand a data set. There's been a lot of things coming out. We have not adopted them yet, but I'm excited about some of Microsoft's Copilot tools where they'll have an Excel file and if you've seen their demos and show you how they use it to analyze the data set and essentially create graphs, etc. Epic's doing similar things within its Cosmos and Slicer Dicer platforms, being able to analyze data. Because you're right, I mean, we have way too much data and not enough people that are able to analyze. And some of the other great things that are helping our reporting team, not really in an official capacity, but just with SQL queries, being more proficient in doing that, being able to get somebody up to speed really quickly by using a tool like ChatGPT or something else to help them write a query at a much faster rate than they would in the past. So a lot of things related to efficiency in that regard.
Yeah, I think it's about the efficiency, and the data and analytics is what builds that efficiency into it. And so our AI governance is actually chaired by our vice president of data and analytics. And so having that direct, close partnership with your data and analytics team is, I think, really the only way for AI to be truly successful and scalable. And so, we had talked a lot about the clinical AI, but there are so many other components, using the summarizer type of functionality and summarizing meeting minutes and summarizing your policies to make it more digestible for your employees. And so there's also a lot more that we could be doing with revenue cycle and automation and, quicker turnaround of some of these just, easy discrete processes. But utilizing components of AI, we can, make those workflows much more efficient.
Staying on you, Stacey, for just a moment, like in your role, how do you prioritize and manage the development of new applications such as virtual specialty care and I'm going to say it again, in AI, in a rapidly involving healthcare landscape that we're in today?
I think you're going to hear this word probably a couple more times from me. It's about governance, and so the saying I say to all my clinical and operational leaders is, if everything's a priority, then nothing's a priority. And so we have to. I've set up service line meetings where I go and meet with all of the service line and clinical leaders, and then we review, here are all the projects you've requested. What are your priorities? What should my team be working on? And so then each of those service line groups then roll up to a larger IT ELT meeting. So our executive leadership is in charge of our IT steering committee. And then they get a final say of, does a project move forward? Is this something that we have the bandwidth to take on? Oftentimes we don't think about the bandwidth of the organization. Sometimes we usually think about the bandwidth of IT, bandwidth of the interface team or the data and analytics team. But what about bandwidth for nursing and bandwidth for your clinical end users? They have a lot of changes coming to them all at one time, and they aren't able to fully utilize some of these solutions because we're throwing so much new technology at them at one time that our adoption rates can be low. And so we really have to work at that governance level and ensuring that we can take on new projects, not only, again, from an IT standpoint, and of course funding, that we do have the funding to move forward, but more than anything, making sure that the organization can take it on as well too.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Talking about the governance and not just bringing in AI for AI's sake. It's really got to solve a problem that you have. And as far as how we prioritize them, we would do it. Is it going to have a financial benefit? Is it going to have a patient safety or quality benefit, or is it going to improve the efficiency of our staff and reduce some of that burnout? So those are kind of the buckets we look at, and obviously we have to have funding for it, which if you've talked to hospital systems across the country in the last year, is very tight right now. So really looking at those ROIs very carefully, not just bringing on something because it's a new shiny object.
And one of the things that I'm curious to see how broadly this applies is one of the things we've seen through our platform and through our clients is pulling out point solutions, like you both were saying, driving operational efficiencies. Everyone's so laser focused on those budgets and how to drive those operational efficiencies through fewer point solutions, consolidated point solutions. And Stacey, that would help what you were saying as well, which is helping with the staff, right? You don't have to retrain on 5 different options for one for virtual specialty care, one for stroke, one for direct to patient, one for what have you. And I'm curious if that's a broader push now because the pain is so high. I guess you have to reach a certain pain threshold and you're willing to do that kind of replacement. And so I've seen that kind of start in a groundswell. I'm wondering if that's a broader movement across the country or not quite yet.
I'd also add in the concept of application rationalization. So I've developed an application rationalization team. That's what they're dedicated to. It's basically the quality assurance of all of our applications. And so they're responsible for managing the testing, the upgrades, patching, and ultimately, is this application still in use? And if not, then we need to sunset it. And if it is still in use, but there's something that can be offered by, kind of the ones that we partner with, our strategic partners, then can we move them off of this, small niche application onto one of our bigger strategic partners? And that's, easier to maintain, usually more cost effective. And so that's something that I really challenge organizations to put a significant work effort into that, because you're going to find that there is going to be ROI attached to it. It's easier to maintain, it's easier to govern. And then from the end user perspective, they have more of a singular experience instead of going to 5 or 6 different solutions for that, for that entire workflow.
This next question, by the way, is for everyone. We'll start with you. We'll start with you, Colin. So, and then we'll do Colin, Jake, Stacey, Meena. How do you balance the need? Stacey said it a couple of times in terms of governance, right? How do you balance the need for technological innovation with the concerns about data privacy and security in healthcare? And I'll just add, when I was on that panel with the the Tampa General folks, their VP of transformation, Dr. Peter Chang, he was talking about when looking at new vendors, the number one thing that they're looking at is that data and security piece beyond everything else, right? Beyond funding, beyond. We'll start with you, Colin. How is everyone balancing that need here?
It's tough. I mean, the easy way out is that's the $1 million question, right? A lot of times in my former roles as CMIO, I had a feeling of innovation being stifled by regulatory. So I need to do X, Y, and Z for the meaningful use program, or we need to implement these things for STARS, or pick your program. And now I can't go do that cool thing with sepsis with the critical care team or whatnot. And that actually persisted for quite some time. And I think there's a couple headwinds that I think are coming for AI right now. One is, and I alluded to this earlier, there was actually recent testimony at the House related to the role of AI in healthcare. And the number one question that was asked by all of them was around data privacy and security. How do we make sure that the algorithms are actually equitable and not slanted towards one population or the other? And you get the sense in things like the HIT1 regulations that are proposed that there's some regulatory potential restrictions that are coming in the field of AI. And I think that alone will be like, meaningful use, redux in terms of slowing a lot of this down. That's just my opinion. The other way to look at it is the genie is out of the bottle and this thing is racing like Mach 10 down the hill. And the gains, when shown, might be so impressive that you can't really slow it down. I know that's a long-winded answer, but the answer is it's tough. It's tough to balance those two.
Yeah, I don't have too much more to add, just that every new application, every new piece of software, every new algorithm that touches our system and our data has to go through our standard, thorough privacy and security and legal review. And so, there's not really any exceptions. I would say with regards to AI, it's probably even it's scrutinized even more, especially, some of these things that are tied to the large language models that had some issues with hallucinations, et cetera, early on. We just really want to make sure that what it's doing is meets our standards. So it may slow things down, but that's something we feel we need to do to protect ourselves and protect our patients.
I would echo the exact same thing. So we have a similar process in place where we have any new project request will be coming in and getting a risk assessment and privacy, legal, and security review before it goes to any of the larger governing bodies, where those are your clinical and operational leaders approving projects to move forward. So, and those have to be completed. And then in Florida, we also have a little bit more difficult bill that we are trying to meet the needs with the data security, and that no data can be stored offshore for any Florida healthcare organizations. And so I wouldn't be surprised if we start seeing that across other states as well too. So that added a layer of complexity to our security assessment this past year. But that is something that we've been moving forward with as well too.
Yeah, actually, and that's interesting that you bring that up, Stacey. From a vendor perspective, we've actually seen that that requirement actually take hold across the board in terms of no data, anal analysis, storage, any of that, as well as subcontractors, right? Not being international and having special call outs for them if you do have anybody. So that's actually over the last year something we've seen come through pretty standard in all the security reviews. From a vendor perspective, we obviously take that as critical, because for us, obviously just as important it is for you all from a patient data perspective. From a vendor perspective, you have one breach, you're done, right? Like that's not something you're going to come back from. And so it is critical. It is literally mission critical in terms of make or break for your company to make sure you're dotting all I's, crossing all T's, making sure you have redundancies upon redundancies. SOC 2, HIPAA compliance, getting your BAAs in place, having your security protocols backups, all of that in place is table stakes, right? And you need to go that extra mile to make sure that the trainings you're doing for your staff, the way that you're making sure that, because at the end of the day, we've all seen this multiple times, it's human error that lets this happen. It's not because someone wrote faulty code. It's because someone accepted a phishing email or someone gave out a password or someone left their laptop somewhere they shouldn't have. So those trainings and regular protocols and reminders are going to be just as important as the security reviews you do once a year or at the beginning of that relationship, and making sure you have that full faith and trust in that relationship, both for you guys and for us, quite frankly, as a mission critical step for us as a vendor.
Meena, how do you see the relationship between healthcare providers and technology evolving over the next decade? And we'll go down the list again, because I always like these future outlook questions, because you all get to paint a picture of the future. And, it's weird. It usually comes true. So if you want to say you each win the lottery, a couple other things that all benefit us as well, that's not a bad thing either.
And Jared, just to clarify, are you talking about from a provider perspective, like actual physician providers, or what are you referring to?
Yeah, physician providers. Exactly.
Yeah. So for us, like what we saw, and we started before COVID, and we started AmplifyMD. We are a multi-specialty physician group as well as a SaaS platform to deliver access to specialty care. And we started before COVID because we saw the issue with lack of access to care and the way that the supply and demand imbalance is there, and there just aren't enough providers. So we started it to drive efficiency so that we can have the doctors that we do have reach more patients. Obviously, COVID accelerated dramatically, and I think maybe in a once in a lifetime, hopefully, way the uptake of telehealth to drive care. But for us, as I see going forward, the winners and losers of this will be the ones that can continue to drive that efficiencies for providers, because the physician burnout issue has not gone away. Sorry if you can hear the baby crying. I'm at the airport. I'm going to start over on that one, Jared. So for the winners and losers from our perspective going forward as a medical group, it's continuing to drive efficiencies for providers and making sure that the provider burnout issue is something that we can help them solve. Why our providers love coming to us and why we continue to recruit very in-demand specialties is because they see our platform and they're like, this makes my day so much easier, right? This helps me practice medicine the way I want to. This helps me spend more time with the patient. And that for us, what we see is the success for the future is continuing to drive that level of engagement from a provider-patient perspective, continue to take away the friction points for providers and for the on-site care teams is what's going to be the key to continue to drive telehealth adoption and continue to drive the expansion of access to care across the country.
And then we can kick it over to Stacey, Jake, and then Colin.
Okay, yeah. So I'd say for us, I'm putting a lot of our money in voice recognition capabilities and really expanding that, and especially with the Nuance Microsoft partnership, I think that's going to be something that's going to be game changing. So we are an alpha pilot for Nuance for Rover and Epic, and utilizing voice recognition to fill out the assessments utilizing an AI component. And then we've also are an early adopter for the DAX Copilot as well too. And so that's Nuance's using the kind of the core functionality of DAX, but with the AI component instead of having that person in the background creating these documents from that conversational, so that ambient voice recognition. I'd say that is probably going to give us time back. Again, trying to look at in-basket, and it's not just AI, but really looking at team-based care. A lot of the physician burnout studies show that there are several things contributing. The EHR is one, but it's also flexibility and scheduling and feeling like they have to take full ownership of that patient journey. And so allowing to promote for more team-based care. So putting psychiatrists in primary care offices, having the MAs and nurse practitioners play a bigger role, that's all going to contribute to less work on the physicians and, hopefully start to decrease some of those burnout components. I also believe in telehealth, not just what we think of telehealth, but more of that asynchronous visit. So how can we take the wearable devices and improve patient care, but not add that burden to the docs? And so, if an alert goes, where does it go? How does that manage? So you really have to think through some of the clinical workflows of some of these other technologies, like the wearables, and how do you embrace that without adding just one more thing for the docs to manage? That's something that I think a lot of organizations are going to have to work through.
Yeah, I would say I'm optimistic for the future, which maybe just characteristic of me. I know when we initially adopted our electronic health records or IT in healthcare, it didn't really lead to the productivity that everybody was expecting. You may have seen the recent paper in JAMA from Bob Walker and others talking about this. But with the large language models and some of the AI that we're bringing in now, I think the burden that the EHRs have created or led to or exacerbated can hopefully be facilitated. So automating some of that documentation, as Stacey was mentioning, automating some of the responses to patient messages, just the ability to get discrete data from text that should help solve some of these reporting on quality metrics and et cetera that has been so burdensome to the healthcare systems, not just the physicians, but other staff members. So I think there's a huge opportunity there that AI can help with, as well as with diagnosis. We haven't really talked about, but there's paper after paper every day talking about how some of these large language models and et cetera, other AI programs are doing as well or better with the physician at diagnosing some complex diseases. And so it may really help, because I think it's still about 10% of all diseases are misdiagnosed or we missed. I think that's the statistic that I've heard. So a lot of opportunity there for artificial intelligence to help us. And we've used this some already. We have a lot of different AI modules from different companies that have come in within our system, either related to diagnosing strokes based on imaging findings, sepsis through Epic's tools, or now with lung nodule and follow-up screening, et cetera. I think we're seeing a lot of this coming around, and I'm optimistic for the future.
Yeah, I think Stacey and Jake are spot on. I think, and I'd be remiss if I didn't throw this out there. I hate the term artificial intelligence. I'm the guy who always says, let's call it augmented intelligence, because it's really augmenting the clinical work. It's certainly not meant to replace folks. I think 10 years will be drastically different. I think we will look back and say, how did I ever practice without this? Which will be fun. I don't think it'll be as fast as we want it to be. I think we're in a sort of a crawl, walk, run phase right now. And I think what we're doing right now with crawling is exactly what Jake and Stacey are talking about, which is some of the lower risk use cases to remove burden. Help me write my note, help me respond, remind me of this, but don't take on, full on decision making, et cetera. But rather serve as this assistant. And this assistant will only get smarter as time goes by. But I think we'll be a little bit frustrated. But at the end of 10 years, I think we will look back, and as I said, we will ask ourselves, how did I possibly practice without this? Which is exciting.
Last question for everyone that I want to focus in on, because you all kind of have a different perspective, a similar but still a different perspective given your different areas. Colin, we'll start with you. We'll just go reverse order. It's really around your 2024 outlook for your particular space. Where do you see healthcare heading? We've had conversations with founders. We've talked about the funding climate. We've talked about, key strategies. A lot of people's strategies on like the digital health side was to try to partner with a health system or partner with a payer. I feel like that's been the game plan for a number of years, but really curious to hear what you think, what your perspective is of 2024 when we think of healthcare.
Yeah, the narrow focus, if you can call it narrow, of DrFirst is what I consider intelligent medication management, all the way from writing the prescription to medication reconciliation to patient adherence, et cetera. And the growth of specialty medications is astronomical right now. I don't think you can, turn left without seeing a new drug, a new wildly successful results, et cetera. And we're always about removing friction for any part of the healthcare team. And so we're taking dead aim at improving the friction related to specialty, improving the experience for all those involved. So I think that's a major focus for DrFirst in the 2024.
I'd say for us, it's really about the deployment of what we have. We are moving forward with new technologies as well too. But I really want to make sure that we have the best EMR that we possibly can. And so we just earned Epic 10 Gold Stars less than a year after being live, and we just won the Most Wired Award for both ambulatory and inpatient. And so our technology is fully deployed, but really focusing on adoption and embracing the technologies that we have to ensure that they're pure as possible. So, making sure we're on the latest upgrades, making sure that we take all of the features and functionalities, and then we train our docs and our end users on these features and functionalities. Of course, we're moving forward with other big initiatives. As we mentioned, several of the AI ones that we're moving forward with as well too. But I want to ensure just the four walls of our system has the best technology possible before we start bringing on more and more and more, because adding new technology on a system that isn't functional is going to only create more frustration for your end users. But adding technology as a supplement to a really good system is only going to enhance that experience.
Yeah, I would agree with Stacey. We're probably in a similar boat. I think a lot of the large healthcare systems are, right now, we mentioned the financial climate for healthcare. I think, that's certainly going to affect our outlook for 2024. So it would be incrementally adopting what we currently have with current vendors and expanding that to more and more users. I know we're doing several things related to DAX and Epic as well. And so just really trying to grow those projects to decrease some of that friction and burden on the physicians. That's my primary aim, is trying to get them less burnout. And so that's what I'm focused on. And then the other things that we'll be looking into are, again, expanding some of our lung nodule program and et cetera, things that will help help bring more patients into the system and get them seen earlier and diagnosed sooner. So I would say that those are our main aims in what I see as far as a 2024 goes. And yeah, just getting people more and more comfortable with some of these new AI solutions and more willing to adopt them. We have a bunch of physicians, early adopters, as you likely know. They come in different groups. So you'll get some that will adopt very, very quickly, and some will come a year or two later, and then some will come kicking and screaming. So we think we've gotten all the ones that are very quick adopters on, and so now it's going to be moving on to the next group.
Got it. Jared, do you want to tweak your question at all for me, or do you want me to answer the same one?
You can just maybe add some piece to it. I would also, for your perspective, I would really love to hear too, is, part of the nature of your role, you're talking to investors. I'd be curious to also maybe hear from an investor side of things, like from these conversations you hear with investors, like what's the landscape look like in terms of healthcare funding as well when we look into 2024?
Yeah. Some what Jake was saying earlier in terms of there's nobody he talks to right now from a vendor perspective that doesn't have AI, and there's a reason for that, because there's no investor investing in a company right now that doesn't have AI as some part of their description. So it's one of those incentivized kind of reality matching what the incentives are out there. And I think part of that is because people do see the opportunity. Obviously, there's a lot of fear and caution in terms of how it's used and where it's used and what's appropriate, what's not. But from an investor perspective, there's definitely a lot of excitement around what can AI do in A, today, but B, to the next level, right? There's the initial stage of how can it just do basic operational efficiencies more than what we're doing, because healthcare, compared to tech, for example, is very behind in terms of what it can do and what it can speed up operationally. So there's a lot of low-hanging fruit on that perspective alone, and we all know how tight budgets are. There's hundreds of millions of dollars that people are trying to find to help improve margins. So low-hanging fruit, what can we do? What can we attack? We know that there's a good product market fit. That's where investors are coming from initially. But then that next level, which I think is more interesting for the companies that do get it right, which is what can you do with that can actually impact the total cost of care and the total clinical outcomes that you're seeing from a patient perspective, from an operational perspective. So this means financial impact, it means clinical impacts. What are the measurable impacts you're having on length of stay? What are the measurable impacts you're having on expanding margins? What are the measurable impacts you're having on bringing in new revenue because you've increased the catchment area because you made your providers more efficient so they can see more patients more broadly, right? And how are you able to then maybe reduce the number of diagnostic tests and imaging you're using? So you're maximizing capacity utilization on these high value areas, but you're doing it in a way that doesn't diminish the value of your DRG for an inpatient stay, or that unnecessarily drives costs in the system overall from an outpatient perspective. So as you're thinking about that, as a holistic level, either from a health system perspective or an investor perspective, there's a lot of opportunity for bringing down our $1 trillion healthcare system to a more rational level, but that doesn't sacrifice the quality of care provided and ideally improves that. And so I know that's a ways off. So for a 2024 answer, it's getting to the point where it's more accepted. So all of the governance issues and guidelines that we've talked about on this call, which is exactly that, getting health systems, payers, the government, and regulations state by state ready to accept and move forward with that. Because like we saw with COVID, when there is an emergency, people will do it, and they'll do it quickly because the resources can be there. But when there's not, what's going to incentivize people to make those steps? So I think for 2024, it might be a year of resetting while people look at what are the opportunities out there and how can we set ourselves up for that success while they try, like you guys are all doing, those pilot programs and those baby steps of, hey, let's see how this is working before we take it out in a bigger way, a splashier way, maybe out in 2025 and beyond.
Well, I want to thank everyone for joining us here on the Seamless Connection podcast. It was a fun conversation. I'm glad we were able to kind of go through this panel style. Everyone had a chance to answer some questions, but also some individual ones, and look forward to staying in touch with everyone and maybe having everyone come on in the future.